which brings us to compassion, which is, as I mentioned before, the central tipping point in the spiritual path, which takes us from dualistic, I'm doing practice to more a sense of just being. Compassion literally means with passion, and compassion has the quality of connectedness. All of us are grieving. There are maybe some people in this room who've not lost a loved one or a relationship lately, but unless I am greatly mistaken, everybody has lost a lot. We've lost part of our childhood dream, we've lost certain identities, and certainly many of us have also lost parts of our bodies, relationships, loved ones. Grief has the quality of separation. Grief is stereotypically thought of as sadness arising because we have lost something. However, I would suggest that any negative emotion, anger, arrogance, narcissism, sadness, is really a grief reaction, because it is coming out of a place of us feeling separate from either ourselves or from God or from the universe. If I'm not being separate, feeling separate, how can I be angry? How can I be narcissistic? How can I have really any negative emotion at all? So when we begin to go into the quality of invocation, when we begin to work with body, mind, and heart in terms of cultivating enough trust to be present with grief, our grief reactions, what is causing suffering in our lives, this very contact with what has been so difficult begins then to gradually make all of our experience workable and bring us to the point where we can then begin to lean into experience, difficult experience, rather than pulling away from it. Pema Chodron, a Tibetan teacher, a very wonderful woman, talks about leaning into your difficulties or leaning into your problems. I don't know quite how she puts it. But what we're saying here is that compassion eventually begins to arise all by itself when awareness, when embodiment deepens enough in relationship to that which has been difficult. So through this practice that we are exploring here together, it may be that during a particular period of your life or a particular meditation practice, you feel like, I'm not doing a very good job. Somebody talked before about, did I do it wrong? And it may very well be that a meditation practice where a lot of distracted thoughts come up, where you're hardly concentrated at all, is a more productive practice period, because what is arising is what is asking to be healed. Now, often in traditional meditation practice, particularly of the Buddhist variety that I'm so familiar with, there is something that I find very problematic for most Westerners, particularly it had been in my own practice, and that is the following. The instructions are, you're meditating, just as an example, you're meditating, pay attention to your breath. A thought arises, you notice the thought, you come back to the breath. You try to do that for a while, and then another thought arises, and back to the breath. And what I'm saying is that if we can, at least at times, expand our focus of awareness, so that instead of just seeing breath, distracted thought, breath, distracted thought, but beginning to notice the underlying emotional, energetic, bodily state from which these distractions are coming. There's something here that's trying to be heard. And if we just see it as a distracted moment and jump right back to the breath or to the mantra, or whatever it might happen to be, we're not really getting in touch then with that deep feeling of hopelessness or aloneness or sadness or abandonment, or who knows what it is. I'm not trying to put I'm not trying to define what it is for you or for me, but that for me, I keep trying to find, my meditation practice for a long time was kind of like the following. There was a lot of thoughts, and I'd work really hard, and I'd get really concentrated, and then my mind would calm down for a while, and then there'd be a lot of thoughts. And if I really looked at the quality of those thoughts and where they were coming from me trying to plan into the future so my life would feel a little bit safer. And I had these severe electrical shocks when I was really young. The world was not a safe place to me. Not only did I get shocked, but in both cases, I almost got killed following my curiosity and my bliss. So what I was learning was, do what you love to do and you might get killed. That same quality in me of, it's not safe, how can I look out there to make it safe, was something that was driving the distracted thoughts. So after a million of those distracted thoughts, when I started changing my focus a bit and seeing that underlying emotional quality, I began to be aware of that. And then beyond that, which is what we're going to talk about before the end of the day here, could I have compassion for that deep need to feel safe, that anxiety, and even beyond that, have compassion for the 4-year-old who stuck the fork in the toaster, who got so frightened then. So that all along these distracted thoughts, which in my Buddhist enthusiasm, my Nazi-like Buddhist practice in the beginning, I saw these thoughts as a problem, were really something in me that was wanting to be met, embraced, and healed. It was not really a problem. It was actually what was leading me toward my wholeness. And you've heard this all the time, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, or what's a problem is actually a blessing, and all these kind of trite sayings, which we've all heard. And when I heard them, I wanted to vomit most of the time, because it seemed like, yeah, right, but I don't want to feel those things. But when I changed my relationship with those feelings, they led me toward healing. But I was only able to change that relationship after I had gotten grounded and centered enough that I knew I could bear being with what previously had been unbearable. Okay, so maybe you've done all kinds of practice. This seems like a very sophisticated group of East Bay therapists and psychiatrists and nurses and healers of all sorts. But we have each developed a personality to avoid that thing that we really want to avoid, that keeps appearing again and again and again. So what I'm suggesting here is that rather than having to look at it a million times as you meditate, can we bring a quality of compassion and a wider focus into our practice so that when difficult mind-body experiences arise, particularly as they arise in a pattern, to relate to them as something that here is a message that has been coming to me for so long. Now possibly I'm ready to really hear it. Now I am ready to touch with mercy, with tenderness, that place that I've been running away from all of my life. That through this practice, through this kind of boring stuff about getting grounded and centered rather than this exciting meditation going off into space and being with God stuff, going right down to the very foundation so that I have enough trust that I can be with that which has been unbearable, that healing of the core wound can begin to happen.